I wanted to start just by assuring Angie that $29.95 is a good price.
Mike.
It is. Am I not coming over? I said they were going to censor this one. Should I just use that? The little light doesn't come on either.
Batteries.
Well,
Get you a battery.
I'll use the other one. That's all right.
Okay.
Get to that later. Okay. So anyway, as you can tell, it's a confusing day. Now my talk is really confused because I wasn't going to speak about all three of our topics, and now I don't know whether to not speak about acceptance or not speak about abundance. But I don't have the patience to decide that, so I'll just speak about flow instead. You know, when I do this in the mornings, I go over my talk when I walk the dog, so the dog kind of helps me with my talks. Although picking Flo, she tried to help a little too much. This was last Sunday, 3 o'clock in the morning, and there was a raging storm and lightning and thunder. And our dog decided that the best demonstration of flow was diarrhea. So we spent a pretty interesting morning. But I decided I'm going to go with it anyway, despite her comments. Because flow is very important in the concepts of spirituality. And, you know, last month we talked about change. And change, well, it's just change. You know, it's something's this way now, and then it's a different way later. And in change, although everything changes, that could be chaotic, it could be sudden, it could be disruptive. It's any kind of difference. But flow is different than that. Flow is change that happens in harmony with the universe. Flow, you know, from the ancients, the concept is that you could do things better if you're in the flow. An idea, how many of you break boards with your bare hands? Okay. This is a pretty aggressive group. I thought I'd have a larger number than that. But a little trick about it. Now, yes, it does take some skill, but if you take a 2x4 and cut it like this, the grain is going to be going this way. And if you turn that and strike it to break it, you may be able to, but it's just as likely that you'll break your hand. And if you do break it, it will shatter and splinter and not be good. But if you have something like, let's say, a 2x8, so it's wider, and you cut it in strips so that the grain of the wood is going this way, and now you lay it down and you strike it, it's really amazingly easy to break that piece of wood. And it'll snap cleanly. Because you're going with the flow of the grain of the wood. And so, I mean, where does this apply? What's it mean in our life? You don't break boards. How many of you ride on cardboard sleds? What do you guys do for fun? I don't understand. But, when I was young, we didn't have a lot of money, and so you made anything you could out of toy, or made toys out of anything you could. So we lived near this park, and on one side of it, the sidewalk was real high, and it went down into the park. So in the winter, you had great sledding. But You couldn't do that in the summer except if you had an old cardboard box and you broke it down. Now you can sit on that cardboard box and slide. But one of the lessons you learn is if you sit on it like you do a sled, the front of the cardboard will catch in the grass and the cardboard stops and you don't. But there's a way around that. You have to lean forward and grab the edge of the cardboard and pull it back. And now you can slide down on that grass, except if you pull it too far, the cardboard will shoot out from under you and you'll fall off. So if you want to be good at riding cardboard sleds, you have to be in a balance of not too far forward and don't pull it too far back. And when you look at this kind of flow, you look at where does that apply and how does it do things, because they say that being in the flow gives you more energy, allows you more capabilities. And I thought, well, in Taoism, one of the ways they talk about the flow of the universe is with water. I was looking at if there's two streams coming down a hill. And one of those streams, it comes down and it hits a rock. And it goes to both sides of that rock. And now it's two different streams. And it comes further down, and when it hits an obstacle, instead of going one way or the other, it splits and goes both ways. And so you have two streams, and then you have four, and then you have a dozen. And by the time that stream gets to the bottom of the hill, you have a bunch of very small little streams that quickly die out. But if you have another stream that comes down, and when it hits that rock, it goes just one way, it keeps all of its strength. And when it hits another rock, it stays together, and it'll develop a deeper route, and that route will pull in the other little streams. And so as it goes down, instead of getting broken up and smaller, it gets larger and more powerful. And when that stream gets to the bottom of the mountain, it's going to be a river that flows out to the sea. And that's when you're in the flow. And how do we do that? When we look at this kind of thing, we look at what spiritual teaching is involved in this. And what we often do is we look at ancient spiritual writings. And the problem with that is there's a lot of ancient spiritual writings, and they say a lot of different things. So how do you find what really applies to this principle? And much like Tim, I felt like what I did was get in the flow of this and found the one that I got too excited about, so I forgot to go back to the earlier part of my talk. This wasn't a dream, this happened right now. So I'm going to talk about the stream. And I told Gene I was going to confuse this talk because it has a lot of little parts, and I just wanted to make sure I did that. A person I knew was like the stream, the first stream. And I worked a long, long time ago in a private residential school for special education students. And we'd have these staff meetings, and there would be a music therapist, an occupational therapist, and physical therapist, and speech therapist, and teachers with masters in special education. And a few of the residential people, and one of them was this young man who was kind of this mid-level manager within the residential program. And it was ran by St. Vincent's. It was ran by a group of nuns, and Sister Patrice was the executive director. And during these meetings, she would come up with things that we needed to do, and she had asked for volunteers, and this young man, Michael, would always volunteer to do this. He was one of these residential supervisors. And I thought, wow, is this guy good? I mean, all these things come up, and he's always volunteering for him. And then later, after one of the meetings, Sister Patrice came up to me and said, Bob, would you work on this? Would you do some research on that? And I said, well, sure, but Michael already said he was going to do that. And she said, yes, I know. And she said, Michael doesn't have a college degree, and he feels insecure about this all of the time. And he's in these meetings with a therapist and the special ed teachers. And so to prove he belongs in there, he volunteers for all of these things. And then he gets caught up in his own work, and he gets anxious about it, and he gets distracted. And he's great with the kids, so I don't want to lose him. But what I always do is find somebody else to do that job. And then afterwards, he feels okay about it because the job got done. You see, he was that stream that keeps getting broken up instead of being focused. And now let's go to our brilliant spiritual thought. And to me, it was really exciting, because what I did was come across two spiritual teachings. These things occurred 500 years and about 5,000 miles apart, and yet they are almost word for word the same. That just shocked me. So in about the 4th century BC, Lao Tse is listed as the author of the Tao Te Ching. In China, about 500 years later, in the 1st century AD, they write the Gospel of Thomas with quotes from Jesus in Israel. And yet, I'm going to give you this quote. It has 3 parts. I'm going to go back and forth between the Gospel of Thomas and the Tao Te Ching. And you'll get this easily. So, Jesus said, I will give to you what no eye has seen. And the Tao Te Ching says, looked for, it cannot be seen. What no ear has heard, listened for, it cannot be heard. What no man has touched, reached for, it cannot be grasped. So, in 400 years before the birth of Jesus, Lao Tse says, the Tao looked for cannot be seen, listened for cannot be heard, reached for cannot be grasped. And 500 years later, 5,000 miles away, in a totally different culture, Jesus said, I will give to you what no eye has seen, what no ear has heard, what no man has touched. What in the world are they talking about? Of course, the Tao means the way, the path. And one of the quotes is, the Tao is broad and plain, but people like the crooked byways. So it's telling us that there is a broad, easy way, but we tend to get distracted on all of those other little ways. And Jesus said in the Gospel of Thomas, if you are undivided, you will be full of light.